Welcome everyone, Dr. Thor here. Get ready for Gnosis. Well, one of the things that comes up often, and of course that's why I talk about it and cover it, is what is the hard science behind radionic science? And radionic science and alternative science is a science. Now, a lot of people don't give it credit because they don't understand the science. Practitioners of alternative science haven't made up their own phony mathematics to explain it, like Newton did and Einstein did. So these people come to a hypothesis, as Tyson likes to say, and then they prove their hypothesis by inventing a mathematical system that states what they just stated is right. Now, that's probably confusing to everybody, and you probably don't think that's true. But it is Newton who invented calculus, I believe, which is a type of mathematics. Well, how do you invent mathematics? It's kind of interesting. So you're making a system within a system within a system. Now, there is all kinds of radionic or alternative science laws. These laws are just as valid and much more provable than regular science, which is really based on very old, archaic science that really has been proven to be wrong. So understanding, and I'm going to try and keep this lecture down and keep it less technical so people kind of understand it. I could spend hours discussing the intricacies, but, you know, if you're not a subtle energy physicist like myself, you're really not going to understand most of this. And I'm not a big fan of technicese, making things complicated to confuse the average person. A matter of fact, if the average person can't understand what you're talking about, well, then you've got a bad teacher and a bad explanation. I mean, the average person should understand what you're talking about. You should be able to explain it in a simple enough terms for them to understand it. I think actually Einstein even said something similar to that. But we need to understand what all this is. And, you know, I've had many lectures here explaining the bogusness of the basic science that we have today and how top physicists of today, Shoul, Carroll, and others, have said they've gotten nowhere. And that in the last 100 years, physics has not changed almost one iota. So we have no new answers, we have no nothing. So physics of the modern time, with all the data and all the brains and all the billions spent on it, have come up with nothing that wasn't already talked about by Newton and Einstein. We still have to understand that these people were wrong. Newton was proved to be wrong. He was another kind of freaky weirdo on top of it. But whatever. I don't know if somebody's personality matters in what they come to. I personally think it does to a degree. I like to figure out, well, you know, if you're a passionate religious person, well, that's going to affect your thinking, isn't it? So the whole idea is that you're going to get a particular take on something, and then what you're going to add to that is your mythology that you believe in. And this also boils down not only to religion, but the mythology of modern science, which basically has achieved nothing in the bigger understanding of life. And quite frankly, while I always try and give engineering a credit, well, most engineers are a bunch of idiots. My father was one, and I met many of his friends. They were pond scum, ignorant, buffoonish slobs. So it's a real problem there, and they knew nothing. And quite frankly, most engineering that we have today is really not very good. We do have some technologies that seem to work better. Cars now seem to work a little longer. But still, you got an internal combustion engine that lasts 125,000 miles. Woo! Same thing it did in 1910. So, you know, Mercedes won't give you a warranty on your car once it has over 80,000 miles on it. I thought Mercedes was such good cars. Not at the dealership. In Deutschland, by the way. So the whole idea is that that ought to tell you something about their standing up behind their products. So the whole idea is that we have to understand that engineering is provable. A car will last a certain amount of miles on that engine. A bridge will hold a certain amount of weight. Now, this stuff is irrefutable. If you say it holds more than it does, people die, the bridge falls down. So all of this happens. But when it gets down to many of our products, well, they don't work that great and they don't last that long. But there is something to it. And our primitive technologies we have today that we are so dependent upon, computers, cell phones, etc. And you remember, these things haven't changed one iota since their first invention. All they are is basically faster and hold more data. There's nothing overly special about it. A cell phone is just that. It's a phone with a cell battery on it. And now we've been able to put little computers in it so you don't have to carry stuff around. So you go to the internet, which is your filing cabinet, to do it. So I don't know if people think that's wonderful or not. I don't. I think we should be further ahead than we are today. So we have all this because we expect so little. Our engineers cannot figure out how the pyramids were built, how the structures pretty much all around the world were built. How did they do it on Easter Island? How did they do it on so many other islands that have these huge blocks that were cut out of rock, moved through the jungles, etc.? So we have a real problem here with modern engineering that really can't copy the feats done 10,000 years ago. But we have to give them credit. We have some stuff. And you got to remember, we have a lot of toxic stuff. We have beautiful LED screens of today, but I remember spending hours and hours in front of TV-type screens, cathode ray tubes, which gave you headaches and were toxic. The electromagnetic fields given off by so many electronics. So there's a lot of very crappy engineering that we have right now as well. Very primitive, just like the internal combustion engine. Very primitive, very dirty, very inefficient. That's tech. Okay, well, the point is that all of this is primitive stuff. We are trying, now that we have faster computers and other things, we are processing more data. But, you know, junk in, junk out. Can we do anything with it? We've made a lot of primitive stuff and dangerous technologies and controlling technologies, but have we achieved anything? But engineering is engineering. We still don't have good batteries. We still have so many things that don't make sense, and we have a lot of toxic metals. I think at one time, I don't know if this has changed recently, but there was like 18 toxic metals in your basic computer. And of course, this gets thrown into the dirt eventually. We don't really have any free energy sources that people will apply to. We invented a little thing called nuclear power that when it goes wrong, you're dead for hundreds of millions of years. Thank you, engineers. So the whole idea is that we have all this nonsense, and we still is very, very primitive. Now, with the fact that a plane works and gets you from A to B, and you can go to China tomorrow, well, it's all wonderful, but these are pretty primitive devices, and they tend to work, but they use huge amounts of fuel and generally are fairly bad machines. So let's not get into all that, but we have this certain stage. But I don't like to give engineering too much. We have all these things. What do you mean have all these things? Well, let me thank the engineers for making now reasonably priced radio-controlled toys. So I just got a great dinosaur, and it does all sorts of things, and it was $20. I remember when these were $500. Thank you, engineers. This will save the world. I thank you. So the whole idea is that this kind of reality, we have to be very careful. But let's get back into the hard science of things. Now, science has really come down to, and it keeps evolving. And we keep using stuff that really goes back to the concepts of the ancient Greeks and before that. The Greeks got everything from the Egyptians got everything from the Atlanteans. But everything has filtered through these streams of information, and since we can't directly connect Atlantis, everything goes through Egypt. The Greeks, who then occupied Egypt for, I believe, 800 years, took everything and put it through the Greek mind. And this was then went from Greek, where then they were taken over by the Romans, into Latin. So the original language of everything, including the Bible and everything else, if you consider that important, all was initially in Greek. Some people think that Hebrew is a Greek language. So this is it. So if you want to read the original documents, you don't read the Latin, you read the actual Greek. So it is interesting, as that's where everything comes from. And more interesting is the fact of really how primitive the country of Greece is today. Just basically agricultural power. They have no scientific base. They don't have any kind of techie. It's really sad that here are the great minds, and of course, they're not really the same great minds that ancient Greeks were, who were the original, you could say, white people. I hate to say it. It sounds so terrible. It's like psychic. Ooh. But these were the original white people, the Greeks, the Romans, the Celts, etc. These were the original people that took this from the actual Egyptians and then give it their own spin, which was a quite interesting combination. The Greeks, of course, and the Romans and everyone else were invaded by the Muslims, and this is how their entire culture changed, and their even physical looks. So all of this is what happened to these particular societies, just to clarify that. So getting back to all that, it does go back to a lot of this stuff, but we're going back to, and I did a whole lecture on the God, the Church of Science, the slavishly following of basically Newton and Einstein, who were pretty much wrong at everything and been proved to, and kind of weird. Einstein married his cousin, was basically thought of as a retard as a child and would never make it. Very interesting that all of a sudden this is the genius boy of the world. And Newton, of course, was a strange religious fanatic, apparently had all sorts of sexual problems and considered women to be evil. So, I mean, all these things that happen, does that affect their thinking? Well, I think it does. I mean, these aren't just some little fetish. These are kind of potent beliefs of how people and where they operate from. So, what comes to is what happened, because Einstein is really nothing. Everything that he stated is not really something that has any validity in this time whatsoever. I'm not sure about the whole relativity thing, and I don't believe that you can't go faster than the speed of light. And maybe you can't speed-wise, but you're hyper-jumping. You're doing all sorts of other things that happens to get over great distances. And for us to solve the problems of the universe, we have to do this. And from what we understand, has been told by the head of Lockheed Skunk Works, we have already done this, as we have already mastered anti-gravity, etc. So there's a whole world going out there. So, these discussions are almost comical, like NASA is, we got to get to Mars and the moon, and we have to spend trillions. Well, we're already there. But, this kind of talk, it's crazy talk about that nut job who believes in alternative science. Ooh, he's a crazy guy. But the point is that getting back to hard science here is the fact that quantum physics, which all scientists pretty much agree with. Let me take that back. It's not all scientists. Some people don't believe in quantum physics. They believe in Einstein. Spooky action at a distance. Yeah, that doesn't make no sense to me. You mean you can have schnitzel and you can have bratwurst right at the same time? Ooh. So the whole idea is that this really doesn't make sense to a lot of people in quantum physics, that the entire world basically is a web, similar to the World Wide Web. It's interesting that that would be called that because it's an interconnecting. So everything in life is interconnected. That's what quantum physics is about. So your hair is connected to the rest of your biosystem. Now, that hair can be on Mars, but it's going to be directly connected to you on Earth. Now, this is what quantum physics is all about. So the vibration or the energy in the hair instantly connects you to you wherever you are in the universe. So that's what quantum physics basically says without getting into a lot of technicalities. So you're instantly connected to that particular. Now, quantum physicists, or at least a lot of them, still don't believe in the transfer of any information. You're just connected, which of course makes absolutely no sense at all. If you're connected, you can then, they say, no, you can't transfer information. So this is where radionics changes the whole ball game. And radionics and psychic power, so to speak, and I hate to use that term, have been 100% proven. The problem is that you get a lot of dingbats in the industry that are producing junk technologies and misstating what's really out there because they don't know anything. Now, I like to clarify things, and I've been studying this field for 50 years now. I'm a noted author. I've written over 25 books, 4 courses. I've been on CNN, BBC, and I've been, most importantly, researching in this field, particularly radionics, now for 40 years. In the bigger field, I've been doing it for 50 years. Started very young and investigated all sorts of mysticism initially at that particular time that was popular. No one else has that background. I've also, as you can see from my YouTube channel, I have all these machines that I've researched to a degree. A lot more has to be done. And have looked at the entire field. I haven't just built a machine and spent my life doing that. So the whole idea to cut through everything is that what really works. And I'm not sold on my products. I'm happy to sell anything that works. I don't need to make stuff. It's a big pain in the bottom. I like to use things to get results. So the problem is what's out there doesn't make any sense, and we'll get into that as well, not to keep this short and sweet. So it's the interconnection of things. Now, here's the other thing in quantum physics that blows everybody's mind. Other things that scientists really can't believe is a factor as well. Because they don't want to give any kind of empowerment to any kind of thing human, which is kind of weird. It's just weird. I just don't understand that. Because after all, whether we like humans or not, and I personally don't, but the point is that everything is created from this ape head of ours, this pea pod on top of our neck. It doesn't matter where it comes from, but it has to come through there. So I just don't understand why the human is looked at so badly. Yes, human corruption and problems is unbelievable. But the point is that why couldn't the human entity, the human species, have all sorts of abilities, empowerments, etc.? But they want to see it come from them. So if you have an empowerment, it means because you used a hammer to build that house. Well, where's the empowerment of figuring out how to make a hammer and how to build the house? You know, it takes all sorts of things that are not physical in nature. They're mental processes of analyzing and figuring out, engineering, understanding, all sorts of things, which all start from a, quote, metaphysical base and then move more and more into the physical. So this is exactly how things work. Now, the main drawback, now a lot of people, and I've listened to people who buy into quantum physics because they have to as scientists. Everybody says it's real, but they qualify it. Yes, everything is connected, but no transfer of information happens. So there's no way to send information from that connected item to the item at a distance. So they pretty much state that. They say no information can be transferred. So that's important to understand in the bigger picture. So all quantum physics is not related. Now, quantum physics has been proven per regular scientific measures, and there's been many, many different research projects to prove quantum physics. And I'm not going to go into all that stuff. It's technical, it's boring, but the regular scientific community has tested quantum physics and found it to be real. Now, here's the other aspect that nobody believes in, and I diverged a little bit from, and that is the actual affecting of the observer. Now, the observer affects the experiment and its ultimate outcome, meaning you're interacting with that web and you're changing it. Now, this is up for a huge amount of debate in all scientific categories, but the point is the observer affects the result. But this is very, very important in the bigger picture of radionic science, because you are the practitioner who's affecting the web that's going out there. You're sending informational energetic fields to a particular person, place, or even thing, and you're affecting it. That's what radionics is about, and that's how it works. Now, quantum physics, without having the observer affecting things and without being able to send information, is kind of bogus. What does that mean? Everything's connected, but you can't affect it? Well, that doesn't make any sense. Now, we take this back into a lot of things which people don't like to think about, which are very effective. Now, magical occult practices, witchcraft, voodoo, sorcery, has for thousands of years worked and still works today. And it works on the quantum physics principle, just like you do with a radionic machine. And as people progress in life and they have a particular style, well, I've kind of moved away from all the occulty type things into using radionic machines, which are kind of an electric altar. So, but these things work, and amazing things have been done by practitioners. But of course, everybody poo-poos these things because they don't understand it and fear it. So they tend to laugh at it. Yet practitioners of all these different practices and the use of particular spirits is awesome what these people can do. Now, it's very difficult to get proof, and who wants to prove that you're a Superman, because you're going to get eliminated, imprisoned, and used by whomever wants to. So it's dangerous being this. So the bottom line is very few people are going to demonstrate these kind of powers, etc. And can they be demonstrated at will? Well, I don't know. Generally, people make lots of statements, and very few of them can back it up. But, I'm not really interested in circus tricks. I don't care if you can levitate or do so many other things. I don't know what the value of that is, and it has to be very repeatable. And there is unbelievable lore connected to things. American Indians who claim to knock animals right out of the sky in terms of they can point to an animal and kill it by just sending energies there. Or a bear charges you and you knock it down. Now, these are things that are lore. Does this happen? Well, I frankly doubt it. Can it happen? Well, I think some people may have these abilities, but people with high abilities tend to act the stupidest, and rightfully so. You don't want to prove how powerful you are. This is dangerous in a evil society. So, these practices are real and they work. Psychic power is real. It's 150 years, they proved everything. Afterlife, you name it. People can tell you unbelievable things about all sorts of things, past lives, etc. Psychic power in general has been proven without a shadow of a doubt. Now, you're going to say that's all not true, because the people that tell you that don't read the literature and haven't done the research. Why should they? The criminal debunkers and skeptics have no interest in doing this. Actually, their job is to deny it, even if it's true. It's just shocking what you hear from all these people, and they tend to be the dregs of the world that are your skeptics and debunkers, and they speak goo-goo. It's baby talk. It's baby reality. You goo-goo-goo, 500 years ago they said that. Goo-goo talk. Go on, jog on, jog on. We don't need to deal with you. So, getting that under our belt, we have to understand the fact is that, so when you take a hair from someone and you connect it to a voodoo doll, and I guess we all relate to that, but puppets are in all traditions, you have now connected that person to that particular doll that you are now sending energies into for positive or negative. A lot of voodoo dolls are used to heal people, other ones are used to hurt them. Now, why would that work? Because of quantum physics, because that hair is connected to that person that you are trying to affect. So you're connecting to a chain of information to be sent there. Now, this is just plain, pure alternative physics. This is subtle energy physics at its best, and few people understand it, and since I haven't written a book on this, people are kind of lost. But you should understand that, and all science today is based on alchemy and subtle energy physics, which basically goes back to thousands and thousands of years ago. If we go back to Atlantis, that's probably 20, 50,000 years ago when these societies were functioning. And no, they didn't leave lumps of plastic goo around, metal boxes. They did everything in high states of consciousness. They didn't need that junk. So the primitive stuff we have is for a primitive thinking mentality person, which we think is special because we went to school to learn it. Dumb people can't use computers. So the whole idea is of course, that's nonsense. So that's how you connect to it. Now let's get into how this is similar. So what you do with a radionic machine is that you take, and it's called a sample of that energy field you want to affect. And these things are not just individuals. You can send, everything's an energy field. Sadness, wealth, well-being, happy, sad. Well, these are energy fields. And you can tune into those energy fields and then direct them at a particular person. So if you want to send prosperity to someone, well, you can tune into prosperity and send it to that person. Now, that's how do you do that? Well, let's get down to the person again. If you want to affect a person, well, you can connect to that person through a picture. And of course, this all gets technical, and I don't want to necessarily go into it. You have to have, to make sure you get the results you're seeking, you need to use the right tools. So you just don't use a digital camera, which has a dead energy in it. You need to use a live energy, which is a Polaroid type film, now called Insta cameras, produced by Fuji, even though Polaroid is still a name somebody owns, and there are cameras based on those technologies. But the point is that you need that kind of physical energy. So the light catches the energy, that's what a picture is, pushes it back into the film in the camera, which is a goo, chemicals, and you now have a hold of that image. You can't do that with your cell phone or with digital technologies. There's just not much there. It's not picking that up to the level that it needs to. When you digitalize something, what you're doing is cleaning it up, changing the image. You're not making it better energetically, you're making it better visually. So you have to have that, and you connect to that person. So once you have a connection to a person, you are locked onto them. Simple as that. Now, you're going to send them that energy field of your choice. So you're in the web, and what you think, you, the observer, affect the experiment. See, as we go back here, so you, the practitioner, are going to affect that person, place, or thing by sending them your energies. Now, how does this differ from psychic power? Well, the bottom line, it doesn't. And William Bankston, who has studied this, a top professional from the common schools, who's tested this for 30 years, sending healing energies, has gotten fantastic success just by using a few simple psychic techniques. Now, how do we go past that? How do we make this more technical, more potent, and how do we define these energies a little better? Now, this is what radionics does, because radionic, in terms of a tuning box, can tune into anything if you're a skilled operator. But let's get real, people. Radionics was never designed for the practitioner to get their own rates. The doctor gave that to you. So to tune in your own radionic rates is not something that was done because it's too highly skilled. So you were either given a book that said, acne, dial these numbers in, and you did that. Or the doctor gave you a number. So you thinking that you can get the number using these devices is something relatively new and done because of the fact that they don't have people that do this anymore. It's not really legal when you start getting into the physical. Now, subtle energy physics doesn't work with the physical. And people get this confused and everything else. Now, you got to remember that everything done, which requires to have a legal license to do it, is something that works on the physical. Doctor gives you something, a pill or whatever, and they can judge the results by using the physical blood tests and other things. Subtle energy physics, you're working on the energy fields, which are not considered valid and are not really physical. They're energy. So it's a fine line, but it's a very definitive line. This is not physical. You're working on the non-physical. Very important to understand this. You say, well, it affects your physical. Well, it does, but not in the traditional manner. So, that's very important to understand. It's to differentiate it from medical practices, which is important for legalities and other things. Secondly, this is a totally debunked field, meaning science doesn't believe in these kind of energy. It's important to understand that, so how can we equate the two together? They're not. They're totally different. We can only equate the results of what happens ultimately. And even those, oftentimes that's difficult to measure. So, you as a practitioner lock into that particular person that you have a picture of by putting that picture on your machine. So, ideally, you would then, there's two ways to do it, of course, but I don't want to get too much into tuning here because we're getting off the subject, but you lock into it. So, you dial in what is basically a high-level energetic field, an informational energetic field. It's not psychic entirely. So you're tuning in and amplifying using a particular pattern. Now, these machines don't produce energies that are measurable by our common world meters right at this point. They could be in the future that there are meters to measure this stuff, and some people claim they have some sort of, quote, biometers. But the bottom line is that you can't really measure this stuff directly. So, you tune into something. And there are many ways to do it, and this is where things get complicated. You can send somebody a reverse energy wave. That'll cancel out the negative energy field that is in that person. So let's say somebody's sick and having some sort of subtle energy problem. Well, you send the opposite field into them to kind of nullify the field that is causing trouble. You can send another energy to that person, whatever it may be, a certain energy that builds them, that promotes their well-being and healing for a particular type of problem. And these are all energetic informational fields you're sending. And you dial that field into the dials, and then you put the picture of the person on the out plate, oftentimes called the rubbing plate. So it depends on how your machine. There's different ways of doing this, but you have an in and an out plate to keep things simple. And I've always used these terms because it just makes sense to me. And you, so you dial in a particular rate for a particular problem. You put their picture, their Polaroid picture of possible hair, what else can be put on? Signatures, and, whatever's available. And you may not be able to get a Polaroid picture. As a matter of fact, it's going to be difficult. But if you're working with the person, you should tell them to get one and send it to you. You can use other things, but this decreases the connection on the web to the other person because you have to analyze and connect through that energy. And if it's weak, it means that your numbers or what you're sending to is weak. So if you're sending to a Polaroid picture a particular healing energy, well, if you're sending it to somebody's digital picture, well, they're not going to receive that much of it. So healing is going to be slow and painful and fail a lot more. So these are all the little things that people don't get that need to be done. But we're getting too much in tuning. But the whole idea is that you're locking into them. What does the radionic machine do? Well, they're psychic tuners most of all. You're tuning it. But it's very important to psychically tune. When you turn a dial, you're really focusing on that person. And you're focusing on sending them a particular energy for that particular dial. This is very powerful. This is what Bengston did when they focused on other people to cause healing. So how did they do it? Well, they did it in an interesting way using speed visualizations and by connecting quickly, fast, and then moving on. They don't believe in concentrating because this nullifies the actual signal. Now, radionics, you're not overly concentrating because you're coming up with a bigger energetic pattern, meaning the fact you have multiple dials, and when these are dialed in and the energy is flowing through a potentiometer, you're getting a gross energy from all three dials. So the dials, the wires create an amplification. Plain and simple, that's all they do. Radionic machines don't put out a measurable energy at this time. Now, there's all sorts of things to amplify your units that you can do. And these are regular set of dials that just go through wires, which most people make, are sufficient for a lot of different work. But there's also, you have to be careful how these are made, how they're connected, what do you do with all these things. So it's a whole pattern, and there are ways to amplify the amplification. Meaning when you have which is traditional 9 dials, this is set up in a particular wiring, you have created a symbol that you can energetically adjust with the dials that will then amplify and send to the target. Now, this amplification is very, very weak, and we live in a very polluted energetic reality. So there's all these diverse frequencies and energies going around, and when you only use a dial unit, you are very low in power. So it would be very interesting if we took someone like Bengston and we were able to amplify what he was doing and see if he got dramatically better results. He does everything with nothing more, and so does his followers and people he's trained, with their psychic abilities by just sending energy to somebody, quick and simple, and this seems to work. So, and you were talking about he has been able to cure cancer. Pretty amazing. Now, what could he do if he had amplified technologies? So, this is something that we all need to look at and understand of what a potent next step this could be. So the machine does that, and that's why machines are so important. If you're going to just do things very base. Now, the quickest, easiest, and least cost way of doing something is to use a symbolic machine. Now, symbolic machines are basically an empowered image that amplifies your thought forms. That's what it is. So, and these work, and they've been proven to work over many, many years. Here again, these are psychic in nature, so they are limited. You don't have that much kick to things, yet we are in a world that we need lots of kick. So they work in a lot of instances, and they fail in other instances because they're not amplified. That's why all of our units are amplified. Very important. So when then you keep stepping up that amplification. So you go from a symbolic to a physical pattern. This physical pattern then brings up the energy to another level, but there's all sorts of things you can put within this physical pattern to help the flow of energy again, which are non-electric in nature or electrical components. Certain resistors, certain capacitors, certain crystals, etc. will all help the process. What it doesn't help the process is the fact that if it's just all non-electric. So electric amplification through special amplifiers who have been changed at a core level is critically important. You can't just use any amplifier. We tried this for years, particularly solid state amplifiers, and they didn't work well. Certainly they did give you a 20% boost, but that's not enough. We needed better amplification to handle the very unique informational energetic field you're producing with a radionic, either symbolic or physical machine. So, you need special amplification. And this is a combination. We use a regular tube amp, but it's highly modified, and we've energetically changed the component energy in those machines in the amplifiers by using technologies to affect the core electronics. Now, the core electronics aren't changed physically. They are changed on a informational energetic level. So we've implanted in these tube amplifiers energy that is that grabs the specific radionic energy and makes it usable through the system, and it's amplified with tachyons and many other things that we place on there, sacred symbols. All of this takes the radionic energy and then puts it kind of what you could say in a 3D image, where it's now taking it and making it very whole instead of the garbled digital signal or crude psychic signal that you get. Now, this is then flowed out into the similar situation with a very base transmitter. And again, we like to just kind of get it out there. It makes sense to me, and we have to understand there is a certain Hertzian component to all these energies, or a certain crude regular component to these energies, and we want to use those. So we believe in getting the energy out to the target. Now, based in quantum physics, you make this connection in your machine, and you don't need to connect in that kind of a crude fashion. Well, I like to make sure we cover all bases. We don't know how much crude energetic broadcasting using these FN transmitter as a carrier wave assists the whole process. I think it does, and I think it's very important, and our research shows so. So we have to understand all that as part of this entire bigger process which is going on. And this is all based in science. Well, if you can carry a regular signal that you speak into a telephone or something else, and this is then amplified through amplifiers, and that's very important to have amplified voice, sound, etc. I mean, if you don't amplify musical instruments, they don't sound like mine. It has to go through an amplifier, and you're getting a whole different change of the energy there by amplifying it and hearing it clearly. Again, if you're trying to affect something at a distance, well, why not shoot it into the atmosphere and help it along? So the quantum effect here is made stronger by alleviating blockages. Now, this is all based in science. This is all accepted, except it's not accepted when someone outside of the scientific world states this. So you have that, and we've been proven, Bankston has proven, and others as well, that this kind of energy works, and has done it for 30 years, curing people of the most horrible diseases with a fantastic high success rate. Now, what are we doing? Well, you can do his techniques and psychically do it, but I'm always want to do things stronger, better, and faster. So when you amplify and broadcast, you're manifesting at a rate of 70 to 80% faster than without amplification. You also are bringing down your actual failure rate to anywhere from 15 to 10%, where without amplification, you have a huge failure rate. It could be as high as 50%. You have a lot of blockages to go into. And can you sit there and constantly send energy through a machine? Well, you can't do that. So you have a problem, or send energy generally. And that's what they don't do this. They only do projections or psychic projections for very short periods of time. When you use a pattern or a radionic machine, you technically sending energy 24/7, but not regular primitive psychic energy. You're sending what would be considered a scalar wave or energetic informational field. This is quite different, because Bankston found that if you concentrate on things, you cancel them out. Your toxic mind comes in and erases everything. So they don't want to do things on it. That's right, and that does happen, and that's a real danger. But a machine is not your toxic mind. A machine is not putting in negative or contradictory informational energetic fields. It's sending the same field all the time. So I hope that has made things clear, and you can see how this is really all based in quantum physics, and certainly you could call radionics spooky action at a distance. So, and it is action, it is a distance, and it does work. Now, the percentage of working, what it works on, I've mostly been involved in metaphysical radionics, producing protection fields, producing prosperity fields, affecting areas that are not direct in life. When you get into working with informational energetic well-being fields, these things get a little bit complicated. And that is not the case of what I've worked with most of the time, but we are moving into all that area, because this is all part of the metaphysical subtle energy technologies that this technology handles. So it is very, very powerful system, and there's been lots and lots of results with it. So if Bankston, over his 30 years of research, can get fantastic results without using a machine, well, what kind of results can you get with using a machine? With amplification, Well, you should be able to break through everything. So, but using these machines, dialing in the machines is not easy. You have to develop certain skills, and you have to make sure that you obtain our courses and our system so that you understand what manifesting is, how to do it, and that whole field. And it just depends on what you manifest, whether that's well-being or lots of money or influence, whatever it is that you want to do. Well, it's all laid out there. And we have informational energetic fields that we put into what's called an energy cell. And you hold and wear these to tap into that informational energetic field, and this can be broadcast or just brought into your body. So if you eliminate the machine by using these high level, high consciousness frequencies that you bring into your body. So it's a complicated process of all these things. I don't know if it's that complicated, but it's new, it's different, and explaining it is difficult for most people to understand in this kind of a format. But that is really what everything is in a little more than a nutshell, because this took longer than I expected. But that's the hard side. Now this, what I've just stated of how affecting matter and transfer is all part of quantum physics, which is readily accepted. Now, it isn't readily accepted that you can transfer information, but that's just a fallacy of quantum physics regular scientists that refuse to understand this because it brings in so many other problems, meaning you're affecting matter, you're manifesting, you're doing things that they don't really want to believe is possible because they fear it. Hopefully everything's clear. Until next time.